Hey folks, this is Joseph at JohnTheHutDweller. Um, I did make a video, part two of Hunter CD, where I went through the two crazy comments he left about the Crusades, and I actually went through them. And right as I was finishing it, at 11 minutes, the computer boom, flipped off. But I don't have. I have to do that when I'm kind of my mind's set, and I actually can go through it, and you know, I guess you'd say when the spirit moves me to. But okay, anyway, I will deal with that later when I'm more awake or whatever. Uh, I've talked about Islam and the fact that I like Muslims, but in Islam there are some dark things that we cannot look away from. Judaism and Jews, I separate those two out. I've said nothing but positive things about Zoroastrianism, and that might be because it is the one that I want to investigate the most, the one that, from the initial hearing of it, I really liked it, but I shouldn't speak one way or the other on it. I know more than the average person, obviously, on it, but it's very hard to find their texts, and even then, it's not necessarily good to look at texts. It's good to find the people, talk to the people, and the texts, read tradition around it, philosophies of it, and history. But what about Hinduism? There really is no. There is such thing as Hinduism, and there isn't. This is very funny. Uh, I believe that when Hindus see Christianity, since they see it in a British colonial fashion, they might not. A lot of the things may be stumbling blocks for them. And I think when Western Christians see Hinduism, they're just as uneducated about Hinduism, if not more, than they are about uh, Eastern Christianity. Now we know the Orthodox Church was in India at a very early time. We know the tradition of St. Thomas, but we also have uh, the um, the Indian princes that are holy saints that come from around the 300, second, third, fourth century actually. Uh, we've seen the Bactrian kingdom which was Buddhist, and then that same area kind of became Christian, but Eastern Orthodox Christian under. Well, there was no division between Oriental and Eastern back then. Uh, which on the outside, if somebody said, well, Oriental and Eastern, it's the same thing. Yes, but kind of, well, you all know the difference. Um, but if you were to drop Orthodox Christianity into India without the Hinduism, without the Hindu people, the followers of Sanatana Dharma, uh, it would just be. I mean, there would be. I think there would be a lot of people moving towards it uh, because I think it's necessary for human beings to respect uh, the Vedic hymns and the ancient um, ancestral memories, basically. I look at the book of Genesis and I see these ancestral memories in the garden, Adam and Eve. If you take it too literally, it's ridiculous. If you dismiss it, it's just as ridiculous as taking it literally. But there is, when I mean literally, I mean really hyper, like as if, oh, that's just a person walking, as if there's no wisdom to be gained from it, as if there's no mystical insight into it. It's just, oh yeah, that's just fact, nah. And you lose so much. Same thing with flood story. But all of these things were in every society, and there is some almost pre-knowledge of it when we come into this world that we say there's something hidden in there. I can't put my finger on it. When you go through the words of the garden story, it is strange. It comes before a time when these things were thought out. They were just written down, I believe, because we go later on and we see uh, post Moses um, Judaism or Israelitism or whatever that is, and we tend to think, how can that? I mean, the Genesis stories really don't seem in. I mean, they seem in conflict with that. God walked through the garden. God says, "What have you done?" And we say, "Well, that's rhetorical. He knew what they done." And like, but again, I would say that's extremely useful to do that, to realize that. But there's also something extremely ancient and hidden in there. And we've got to look at the Vedic hymns like this. Now, if we pick and choose certain parts of Hinduism to criticize, there's certain schools, and not every. I mean, in Hinduism, you have okay, all religions are a path to God, all beliefs are a path to God. Everybody has their own God, yes, but of the Hindus, there the followers of Sanatana Dharma or the Indian people. See, these phrases are really useless. Among them, there are this is the moral way. There are people who use these kind of cultic ways. There's black magic, basically, uh, and those are kind of looked down upon by normal people. Well, even normal people, that's really not useful. But there is a sense of okay, yeah, there's a place for that, but you know, there is a different schools where you would have, well, even school is very bad, different kind of groups. Again, it's united kind of like the Olympic rings. Uh, and they're not all, nobody, I don't know if everyone can say, yeah, I accept all of those, but really as personal devotion, that can't happen. Um, and there is different ways of going through it. And the Indian life, at least how it was, I don't know about today, had different stages of progression. Okay, you were a child here, you were an adult with a wife here, you surpassed that and went on. And there's, I think there's four. I'm only dividing up into three, or there's possibly more. Um, and there's a point where somebody disowns their family basically and says, you know, I'm the brother of everyone, the sister of everyone, but I have no relation to anyone. So you'll hear people say that man over there living in the hut was my uncle or was my grandfather, and it's we have a reaction to that, especially me, of being because family is like no. But again, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of it, and I'm always going to have a misunderstanding of it. I accept that. But when Westerners come in and they see these things of, yeah, there was absolutely idolatry, and then there was people who used icons, and they're blended together. Of is that idol worship or is that icon veneration? Well, the Western Christian will come and say, oh, it's all idolatry. You're just making this up. You're just doing that so you can support Eastern Christianity. No. Uh, when we come in and we start slandering all of Sanatana Dharma, basically, uh, we do a disservice. We wind up slandering certain valuable things in the Christian tradition, and I don't think that's healthy. Uh, yeah, there would be certain aspects of Hinduism that I would oppose pretty much. The caste system as it is today, not too good. But that's not the Hindu scriptures. But that doesn't make it any less Hindu because it's part of the culture. I mean, this is not a Protestantism where you just take the scriptures and say, all right, that's it. We're doing this. We're not looking at any tradition. We're not looking how our life was lived prior to this. Um, and even there was very early, and you look back and you think, is this is monotheism with an afterlife? There is no talk of reincarnation, because the basically what is called Hinduism is the it's kind of like how ancient Rome was. You look down and you say, well, all these religions are Roman religions, but you have the cult of the emperor, you have the gods of a town where people actually worship that god and believe that God is their intercessor, and that's the main devotion. And each town has a god, so all are recognized as God. Initially, that's probably how the Roman pantheon began. You probably had Mars here, Apollo here, and then the stories were kind of made to fit together. And then you have the wider philosophical, which says, okay, all are true, none are less true than this. But you would probably still have man on the street saying, no, uh, Apollo or Vishnu, that's the god. This is great. And you'd have another one saying, no, Kali or the Virgin, that's the one to go to. And I'm not saying Kali was a virgin, or I'm just taking two different views and kind of pushing them together. And there is a thing, there is no evangelism in Hinduism. Well, as of the whole, no. But we do see how transcendental meditation moved to the West. There were Hindu sages or whatever that said, okay, I want to go enlighten them, not to try to tear down their Christian belief. That's why a lot of the evangelists in the 70s, a lot of the Jimmy Swagger types tried to say, oh, they're cloaking it in Christianity to bring it over here. Well, you would speak the language of the religious people of the day or the country. You wouldn't try to make it hard for them. They would see that as, being kind of ethnocentric. It's kind of like going to Africa and bringing a very Swedish picture of Jesus and saying, hey, look, you got this guy. We know Jesus wasn't Swedish. He wasn't Max von Sydow, I guess. Again, this video is absolutely useless because it doesn't say anything. Notice that. And if people come and tell me I'm wrong on a certain point, I'll say absolutely. But then I'm also right. See how, there is, again, Hinduism is just as hard to talk about as orthodoxy because I can't ever communicate to you what orthodoxy is. I have to tell you, go there. Your experience of it is absolutely valid. Because in orthodoxy, this is a criticism that the evangelists make. Well, again, maybe this video is giving out too many secrets of orthodoxy. Is it? I don't know. Because you would see the cult of the saints, the cult of the virgin, the cult of the warrior, the cult of wisdom. And these terms aren't used anymore because cult has gained such a negative connotation. Or some even Easterners had said, well, that those terms, cult of the virgin or cult of the saints, that's more of a Western thing. But we have to remember, before 1054, we could still take what was done in the West and say, okay, it's valid. And certainly before the year 500, we can look over it to the West and say, yeah, a lot of those things that would eventually screw up Western Christianity, if you brought them into Eastern before all this other stuff built up, it would be perfect and actually beneficial. Now, the Orthodox Christians will absolutely know what I mean when I talk about this, and the onlooker will be lost, which is sad. And I don't say that out of arrogance. I just say that out of maybe experiential. But then again, I have to say there may be some Protestants or whatever who would hear what I'm saying and say, no, I get it. But then again, this could be a deterrent for, you see how hard this is. It's actually kind of ridiculous. But it's not, it's beautiful. Hey folks, this is Joseph at JohnTheHutDweller. I did make a video, part 2 of Hunter CD, where I went through the two crazy comments he left about the Crusades, and I actually went through them and but I shouldn't speak one way or the other on it. I know more than the average person, obviously, on it, but it's very hard to find their texts, and even then, it's not necessarily good to look at texts. It's good to find the people, talk to the people, and the texts. Spirit moves me to, but Okay, anyway, I will deal with that later when I'm more awake or whatever. Uh, I've talked about Islam and the fact that I like Muslims, but in Islam there are some dark things. Right as I was finishing it at 11 minutes, the computer boom flipped off. But I don't have. I have to do that when I'm kind of my mind's set and I actually can go through it, and you know, I guess you'd say when this we cannot look away from. Judaism and Jews, I separate those two out. I've said nothing but positive things about Zoroastrianism, and that might be because it is the one that I want to investigate the most, the one that, from the initial hearing of it, I really liked it.